Hello and welcome to the Soberful Podcast. Before we get started today, quick favour, if you are a fan of the podcast, please make sure you follow us on whatever platform that you listen to your podcasts. And please give us a quick rating if you have a second. We've done over 5 years of free content, and just having a good rating or a decent rating always helps the show get noticed. So if you have a second to do that right now, Chip and I would be so very grateful. Another quick announcement. Chip and I have a one-off workshop for one night only taking place on May 18th. It is called the Sober Code, and it's really going to be a workshop packed with all of our experience and wisdom. We have over 60 years of sobriety, the two of us together, all packed into one event. We would love you to come and be there. It is recorded if you can't make it live, but hopefully it's a time that works for most people all around the world. And if you want to find details, go to soberful.com, sign up there, and Chip and I would love to see you at that workshop. Now over to the
I dreamt that you were twisting through 7 suns of gold, and the gypsy was insisting.
Guess what, everybody? Guess who is visiting the Soberful podcast today? It is the one and only Laura McKowen. Laura, welcome.
Hello. Again.
Repeat guest, friend
Repeat,
of the
repeat.
show.
Mhm.
So we're really excited to have you here because Laura is here to talk about her fabulous new book, Push Off From Here. I swear to God, I just had a client yesterday who said she finished it. And she
Oh.
said it was wonderful.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
she'd read your first book. She couldn't wait to read the second one. So this just came out. So
Yeah.
if you know anything about Laura, she's a really fabulous writer. She really can just say things in a certain way. Her previous book is We Are the Luckiest, The Surprising Magic of a Sober Life.
Mhm.
So first of all, couple of congratulations on the book, but also congratulations on something else that happened over Christmas.
Yes, I got engaged. I got engaged over Thanksgiving.
Oh, was it
So,
Thanksgiving? I knew it was a
yeah,
holiday.
the
Yeah.
holidays.
Yeah,
Whatever.
yeah, the holidays.
Yeah,
It was beautiful. You sent me the video.
I
Oh my
did.
gosh, how shocked were you?
I was completely shocked. I never,
Really?
ever I mean, when in your life are you actually really shocked? Not often. And I never thought he would do it in front of people. You know, we're in the point in our relationship where I was thinking, oh, maybe it'll be here, maybe it'll be there, because we knew we were going to get married. But I never thought it would happen on that trip because our families were there. So I was shocked. And
Oh,
that was really cool to be shocked that way.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
It just looked perfect. Like he really did such a great job. And
He did.
yeah.
He did a great job.
And he's a gift of sobriety, right?
Totally. Total gift of sobriety. I mean, you and I had many, many, many conversations about my relationship struggles, and uh, that was one of the most painful parts of my past and even my sobriety, because once I took the alcohol away, that was glaring. My dysfunction, my insecurity, my sort of just the wounds underneath that had driven me to seek things like alcohol, and I just didn't have any good template for what a healthy relationship would be like. I didn't, I am a child of many divorces and never really saw healthy relationships, and yet I yearned for one so badly, but I didn't know how to do it, and I just couldn't figure out how to stop repeating that same cycle. And it pushed me at a certain point to be really desperate about 4 years in, and then I did a lot of work. But yeah, he is a definite gift of sobriety. I didn't imagine that I could have a healthy relationship like this, and it's great.
And it's because you worked really, really hard on yourself. You worked really hard on yourself and you went deep
Mm-hmm.
to be able to be someone who could have a healthy relationship. I saw you and you really worked hard on yourself, and you deserve all of this. And it just sounds wonderful. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
So the book, can I just start with the cover? It looks
I
beautiful. Now, is this is this water where you live? Because I know you live by the ocean.
It's not.
It's not. Okay.
But water is the ocean is a huge part of my world.
Right.
But it's not. That would be cool if it was. And man, we worked hard for that cover.
Really?
There were dozens and dozens and dozens of others. And for some reason, we had talked about water from the beginning because push off from here, for me, always conjured up like an image of pushing off from a pool or
Right.
like a boat, sitting out from
Yeah.
harbor. But once we started exploring covers, we all sort of abandoned that and went to do all these other directions. And then finally, in the nth hour, I was about to go with a cover I liked, but I didn't love it. And then the publisher was like, I feel like we need to talk about water. I was like, when did we forget about water? And yeah, so that's where we landed. I love the cover.
So I'll tell you what I like about it. And if you're listening to this, you can't see it. So you just have to go and look at Laura's Instagram because I'm sure it's there. But I like that it's dark going into light.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I really liked about it.
Yeah, and all that purple and pink. Those are my colors.
So, okay, what's the book about?
So the book is called Push Off From Here, but the subhead is 9 Essential Truths to Get You Through Sobriety and Everything Else. And so it follows these 9 points. And the 9 points have a whole story. In 2016, a woman wrote me a letter. This was when I was a couple of years sober, and she was struggling with her sister who had an alcohol problem and didn't know what to say to her sister. She didn't want to push her away. And she was going through all the things that we go through, right? The fear and the anger and the frustration and sadness and all of that. And she said, I don't know what to say. What would you have wanted to hear? And so I wrote her this very long letter. And then at the end, I said, if, all of this is too much, just give her this list. And in that list were these 9 things. And those 9 things sort of stuck with me after I wrote them. And then they became the epigraph to We Are the Luckiest. They were just, that part before the book starts, just these 9 points. And people were really drawn to them in my book and would want to talk to me about just, those 9 points. And I started sharing them on social media and they were sticky. And then in 2020, I started the Luckiest Club, which is a sobriety support community. And I made those like the backbone of the community. We say them at the end of every meeting, and they became a big part of the culture, but it was also clear that people really wanted to know more. Like, what do these actually mean? How do you apply them? I suppose we could say the 9 things.
Yes, please. Can we go through them actually? Because
we'll go through them.
Yeah. So number 1, it's not your fault.
It's not your fault is something that was very hard for me to accept. It's hard for a lot of people to accept that becoming addicted and the role alcohol plays in our culture, there's so many factors that are just not in our control. And it's important to acknowledge that. Yeah, it's essential to acknowledge that there are always factors that are out of our control. I mean, as a woman and a mother, especially, I thought, I am just a piece of crap. Like, if I loved my daughter enough, I would stop. If I loved my husband enough, if I was a good enough friend, or if I, if I could only, I would just stop. Like, this was a moral failing on my part, or a lack of control, or whatever, all those other BS things that we hear. And it wasn't my fault. I did choose to drink at some point, but I didn't know where that would lead. Trauma isn't our fault. A lot of our patterning isn't our fault. But that's an incomplete statement, right? Until you get to number 2, which is, it is your responsibility. And that's an equally hard pill to swallow, right? At the end of the day, you were the one who taught me, we are responsible for our experience. You aren't responsible for things that happen to you. But at some point, your life has to be your responsibility, and how you respond to things you have to take responsibility for that, or there's just no freedom. There's no sobriety. There's no peace. You just keep repeating the same patterns. And so That's sort of the counterpoint to number 1 is number 2, it is your responsibility. And then we go to number 3, it's unfair that this is your thing. Yeah. And this is one that I really liked writing this chapter because I wasn't actually sure what I would want to say beyond that. I think it's just, it's important to hear sometimes that things are unfair. In writing this chapter, I discovered, it's nice to hear that, but we don't actually expect things to be unfair. That's not why or to be fair, excuse me. That's not why we need to hear that. We need to hear it because we need someone to witness our sorrow. We need someone to acknowledge that this is painful and that it's not happening to us because we're terrible or we deserved it. It's just things happen and this sucks. It's really unfair. And yet this is number 4 is this is your thing. So it's unfair that this is your thing, but this is your thing.
That's one of the things that I always try to make clear to my clients is that here's the thing. Everybody has a thing. Right? Everybody has a thing. And it's so easy to look and think, well, they're all fine. Everybody's fine. I have this thing. But everybody has a thing, right?
Or at least.
At least one.
At least
multiple.
One. Right. Yeah. And this just, you can deny and try, and I did, and try to get out of it being your thing. But the truth is, if it's your thing, it's your thing. And that leads you to the next point, number 5, which is this will never stop being your thing until you face it. So you have to acknowledge it's your thing, but then you have to actually do the work to face it. And that's chapter 5. And it's the sort of the most practical, actionable part of the book where I really lay out like, look, these are 5 things that I've identified that I think are really essential to sobriety. And here's some ways you can practice them.
Oh, can you say more about that? What that is?
Sure. Yes. And I think these are sort of close to what you say, but I can't remember exactly. The five things that I identified, I call them practices in my book, are acceptance, honesty, connection, embodiment, and service.
Nice.
Acceptance, I think we all understand that, but I go pretty deep into it because there's, acceptance of self, and then there's acceptance of everything else, that's not us. Honesty is probably the most important one, foundational for me. Connection, we never do this alone. Embodiment, I think, is one that's missing from a lot of past literature and something that's only barely talked about. But what I mean by that is, the body is part of our healing process. We have to acknowledge the body. Trauma is healed through the body. It's incomplete to heal without the body. And sometimes that can mean movement, but sometimes that can mean, exploring other modalities that help you process things through your body. And then service.
Service beyond ourselves.
Right. Service beyond ourselves, service to other people in recovery, specifically. And I didn't really get that. I heard that a lot when I first got sober, but I didn't really understand that. I thought service had to be some big grand gesture, that you're doing. But in reality, I think service can be very small, speaking honestly about your sobriety in any context is an act of service. With people in recovery is an act of service. Showing up to a meeting and of whatever kind and paying attention is an act of service. So service to me, it's funny because the longer I'm sober, the more I sort of return to a lot of the first things that I was, that came to me through AA, and service was a big part of that. And I can see now why that's so important. It gets me out of myself every time, and it's a tricky thing because a lot of people, especially women coming into recovery are, you know, are used to putting everyone else before themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not what service is,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's not what I'm talking about. A lot of times you have to sort of fill up your own, you have to get to a place of being okay enough to show up for others. But that's also why I try to emphasize that service is not something that's supposed to put you out beyond what you can afford to give. It's it's embedded in a lot of being part of a community, honestly. So that's 5. And then 6 is can't do it alone. And I talk about why. And that's still my biggest thing, is trying to do things alone. So that was a good one for me to write.
That's the Introverts Dilemma, Laura.
It's the Introverts Dilemma. Yeah, and I vilify, my shadow word, I guess, would be needy. Like, I just try so hard not to be, and have always thought that was a weakness. I've gotten a lot better. But yes. And then 8 is only you can do it. So back to that whole, you can't do it alone, but only you can do it. At the end of the day, no one's going to watch you. No one's going to babysit you. No one's going to be there in the quiet moments.
Yeah.
So you have to do it alone. And then the last point is,
well, you've got you are loved.
Oh, you are loved, right?
It's number 8. 7 is only you can do it. 8 is you are loved.
You are loved. Yeah. And then the last point is, we will never stop reminding you of these things, which is just a promise that you get to keep practicing, and you get to keep coming back. And it's not, this isn't a once and done. It's not a linear process. It's just all a practice. So going back to the origin story of how these came to be, we started saying these things in the Luckiest Club all the time. And then people wanted to know about them. And so this wasn't a book I planned to write, but it became evident that it should be written. And in it, I explore those 9 points. That's the entire structure of the book. And I include lots of my own stories, but more stories from other people, which was really fun. Stories from a lot of the leaders in TLC, a lot of people in my community, lots of people I've encountered throughout recovery.
How was it writing it?
I really struggled. Part of it, I think, was writing it post-pandemic. I wrote this in 2021 and 2022, and I had really lost my voice. I was really afraid to say anything. I thought I had also said everything that I could possibly say about sobriety, because I had just written We Are the Luckiest. So I really struggled. I also don't love writing in that prescriptive sort of teacher voice. I struggled with that because I'm not a clinician. I'm not a academic. I'm just a person who's, gone through this myself and has watched a lot of other people go through it at this point, and I'm very curious about the experience of humanity, but also getting sober. And so I had to constantly remind myself that it was okay for me to say things and make declarations, and just continually invite people into their own, to question what I'm saying, and that just because I'm saying it isn't true, but to also have a strong voice. So it was hard.
I love the 9 things. I think they're just, I think they cut through the crap of it that's around people who struggle. I mean, they're just, you can't argue with them. They actually, one statement balances out the other statement really, really well, about being responsible, and it's about a shift in perception, isn't it? Because the whole thing about this is your thing. Like, we just perceive ourselves as so special and different. We're the only people who have a struggle, who have a thing. It's not fair. Everybody else is fine. And once sobriety is really a shift in perception, we perceive that, I was genuinely shocked when I found out that other people struggled as well. I mean, I was literally genuinely like, bloody hell, really?
I know we all do, because
So self-absorbed.
I know it is. I talk about that in the book too. How funny but not funny. I had this story my whole life about like everything was my fault. And I think people fall into generally one of two camps. Everything's my fault or everything is everyone else's fault. The world's out for me, or I am just I'm to blame for everything. And I joke about how not just damaging, but how ridiculous that idea is, and how grandiose that the world should, that I am in charge of the world. And that if I'm not holding something up, or if someone's upset around me, that it's a failure of mine. Yeah. So what a shift in perception. What a life-changing shift in perception.
And it's
But
really, sorry, go on.
Don't you think that most people, not just people in recovery, feel that they're alone in their own feelings in their head because they don't have these conversations? Like, we're forced to have them to survive and get sober and live. But I think most people feel this way.
Oh, 100%. And honestly, I mean, you coined the phrase, "We are the luckiest." I just, I don't want my kids to go through what I went through. And I know you don't want your daughter to go through what you went through, but the lessons and what it forced me to do, and just like, we were talking at the beginning, like, it forced me to go to the bone. Like, I went to the bone in my personal work.
That's right.
And I don't know if I only did it because of the pain. So I just, I observe people, and I think that, so I think there's two kinds of people in the world. I think everybody has stuff, and some are working on it and some are not. And you can spot the difference. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And what you said about kids is so true. I don't want my daughter to go through what I did, but I didn't learn from just watching other people go through pain, and so that's the unfortunate reality of life. Is we all, we all, I think, get this invitation to sort of be initiated and walk through our heroine's journey. But a lot of people don't accept the invitation, and it's understandable why they wouldn't accept the invitation. You and I have talked about this a ton. When you see people, you said, I've seen people like walk up to that cliff so many times and just decide not to jump. Yeah. And I think of that a lot. And I use that phrase when I'm teaching people a lot, and credit it to you, but that's true. I think it's very true. And so what I wanted to do in this book is like, not just tell people to jump off the cliff, but also say, like, here's some ways you could actually do that. And we have this idea that there's something around addiction that's particularly bad, or, probably because the way it manifests in some really ugly, gnarly ways for us and the people around us. But there's nothing that unique about addiction. It's just like another invitation to walk through that pain that all humans feel.
I've been thinking about this a lot because I have been thinking about it as a parent and the life lessons. And what I believe is essential is how we struggle. That struggle is a really essential part of the human experience, and we all have struggles. And I think that we are certainly at a point in our culture where we look for external fixes to the struggle. And I don't know about if you feel the same, but as a parent, I often see parents steal the opportunity to struggle from their children. And so, yes, I don't want my kids to do what I did with alcohol and drugs because it's life-threatening. But I also know I need to let them struggle. Yeah. It's so hard.
Oh, it's so hard. I mean, I'm going through that right now with my daughter. She's just turned 14. Oh. And so she's in the really Lord of the Flies era of junior high, where the girls are just nasty.
I think that I have boys, and I'm not there yet, but I do observe. I think girls are worse in
Oh,
that,
they are. No doubt.
right?
Men
Yeah,
go through other
yeah,
initiations.
yeah,
Women go through this like psychological warfare.
yeah.
And I have to keep myself from interfering daily, literally daily, because luckily she does talk to me about it. You know, we have a 25-minute car ride to school and home from school, and I hated that car ride when it happened because we moved in with, you know, my fiance. But now I'm like, oh, this is good time because she talks. But I've learned to just sit there and listen and go, oh, that's really hard. Yeah, that must be really hard. I can see why you'd be upset when all I want to do is fix it. Or tell, you know,
Get
go
out
punch
of my
some,
way.
go, yeah, and or go beat the crap out of some 8th
Momzilla.
grade girl. Yeah, so I totally feel you on that. And, you know, and we're not even talking about alcohol or drugs or like sex yet. And things that will happen, you know, that she could get into there. So we'll see how that goes. That's gonna be even harder for me.
Yeah, I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old, and he's just honestly sweetness and light, and I'm like, oh God, look at middle school boys.
What's gonna happen to you?
Oh God, I know. But I think the getting back to the idea of the struggle, this is what your 9 things here are about how we struggle, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's true.
almost an instruction manual to struggle well,
Oh, I
because
love that.
we're gonna struggle. That's a thing. You're all gonna struggle. It's how we struggle, and can we struggle well?
Yes, I think I've never heard it said that way, and not about this book, but I think that's very true. I think that's a great way to frame the book, but also this idea of struggling well reminds me of this Mary Oliver poem about like it's not the weight that you carry, but how you carry it. Books, bricks, grief. Yeah, she's got this beautiful poem about that, and that feels true. And it's not about struggling with it eloquently or beautifully, or, you know, it's freaking messy, and going to
Yes.
the bone is messy. And a lot of like what I said before about always trying to do things alone, addiction was the first thing that I couldn't do alone. I literally couldn't. It was the first thing where everything that had gotten me through my life to that point just didn't work. It wasn't going to work. And so I only did it. I only, you know, pursued help out of total desperation. And I think that's important to say because people will often say, you know, how'd you find the courage? And how'd you find the courage to start writing about it? It's like, look, that was not courage. I was just trying to save my life. That's all.
You've talked a lot. I mean, if anyone's interested more in Laura's story, she's been on the podcast before, and talked about her story and like what helped at the beginning. I want to ask you, not that you're in the middle, but now you're past the beginning bit, and
Oh,
now
good.
you're in.
Thanks.
Now you're.
I'm so glad that's true. I have
officially
8.5 years.
Now you're into like let's call it mature sobriety.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You're past that. What's been the struggles there, and what's helped there?
Great question. First of all, I'm glad that I've been deemed.
I'll send you a memo.
Thank
You
you.
can put it on your
Will you
wall.
send me a certificate? Yeah. I'm officially in the middle. I always thought it was so annoying in AA when they would say, you know, in 5 years you get your marbles back, and then in 10 years you know what to do with them. It's like, F you, but it's kind of true. It's kind of a good saying.
The first 5 years is kind of like, yeah, like which end is up.
Yeah, totally. But I thought I knew everything. What is a struggle now? Was that the question?
Yeah. What now? Now you're not struggling with alcohol. You're not struggling. You know that's done. What are the struggles now, and what is helping you now?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I wouldn't say I'm struggling hard, but it's on my mind, and it's something I'm interested in working on, is emotional sobriety and sort of shoring up all the baggage that I have had around friendships. I wrote a piece about this today in my Substack.
Just read it. I just read
Oh,
it. It was really, yeah, it gave me little like, ooh, yeah, I remember. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's so interesting because what happened was I read Christy Tate's memoir, which is excellent, called BFF.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really good. And you
On
need
it.
to read it and then talk to me about it. And I cried from beginning to end
Wow.
of reading that book. And it's all about her struggle with friendships, female friendships. And she's someone in recovery. And, you know, her first struggle was all about her romantic relationships and finding a man. And then when she sorted that out, she was like, well, shit. She was very upset to find out that she had the same struggle with women and friendships. And I don't feel exactly that way. I have good friends, and I know today that I am a good friend, but there's this nagging suspicion in the back of my mind still that at my core, like the most true story about me is this story that I'm a bad friend. And like there's this rotten middle that I haven't really looked at. And it all has to do with how I behaved when I was drinking, which was like a significant part of my life. So, you know, high school through college to my 20s and mid 30s. That's a very formative period of friendships. And I have always, I rarely dated people. So friends were my world and my family because I also moved away after college and lived in a city where I didn't have any family. So friends were like my world. And I just realized through reading Christy's book, one, that I wanted to like make more effort towards friendships and that was worthy. And two, that I had a lot of shame about past failed relationships, mistakes, and sometimes still hurt about friendships that didn't, that ghosted me or that didn't go well. And it's like this interesting area that we don't really talk about that much. Romantic relationships get all kinds of airplay, but we don't talk about friendships all that much. There's not, we just don't. And it's not like they're just so interesting because our contract with friendships is different. We we don't, it's not like we'd go to therapy with a friend, like we would, that would be weird, but yet friendships are this critical part of our lives and we all sort of know that. And once I started to scratch at this, I realized, oh, this is a painful thing for a lot of people, women. And so I'm really interested in that now. I think I've reached a point where I'm ready to like talk about it and explore it and go there. It's kind of like when in therapy, many years ago, my therapist was like, we're going to have to talk about your mom at some point. And I was like, I'm good. Everything's good. She's like, yeah, okay. We're going to have to talk about your mom at some point. And I was like, I'm fine. She's like, okay, good. And then she would like give me some homework. And I was like, yeah, I didn't do that. I don't need to do that. And it went on like that for years. And finally I was like, oh, I get it. My stuff isn't good. Like my man stuff isn't going to get better if I don't look at the mom relationship. And that was very true. And I feel like that's the sort of place I am with friendships. So what's helping with that are the things that have so far, the things that have always helped is one, writing about it. I learned a lot even writing that piece that I sent today, reading about it. I'm sure I'll be talking about it in therapy and among, with other friends and applying, the things that I know, like honesty, community, all the tools that I wrote about in this book are like real. That get me through. The other piece I'll add to that is I realize that in the area of friendships, I still have this very black and white, like this was the villain and this was the good person. This is the bad person. This is the good person. It's never like that in any relationship. And so I know that I have work to do there. The other areas that are hard right now, there aren't many, to be honest. And like I say that with such sort of shock and humility because I don't struggle hard with my life right now. I just don't. It's not that shit doesn't happen. I mean, I have things in my family that are going on. I have stuff, but there's no big turmoil. There's some stuff with like getting older and my body, and like there's things like that, but those aren't problems. Like those aren't things that are taking me down. It's just like, oh, this is a new, interesting sort of thing that I need to learn to accept and work with. But yeah, that's how I feel today anyway.
I can relate to that in that it's not that I don't have stuff going on, right? I have stuff going on. It's the internal struggle has
Yes.
what has it's been replaced with is I feel anchored. And I never felt anchored before. And the struggle was very internal, and that's gone. So it's not to say there's not, my son has some health issues that feels like a struggle, but it's different, isn't it? It's different.
Totally different. About 3 months ago, I wrote this piece about called the subversive message of recovery. And this is another thing we have talked about a lot, and that you really have modeled for me, is this idea that we can get to a place where there isn't just chaos and pain and struggle all the time, not even most of the time. And we're not pretending that it's that way. We're not bypassing things. It's just that there is an internal peace. And that's not a message that's very well received sometimes. I've noticed.
Yes.
And I know why I wouldn't have wanted to receive that message. Because if I didn't have my problems, then whose fault was it? If I didn't have my problems, what am I going to do? Like, who's responsible? I am.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah. Freedom from our story.
The
story we tell ourselves about ourselves. That's the biggest, that's the massive shift in perception, and that's the breakthrough. And we do a lot to keep ourselves stuck in our story, because we believe that that's it. This is how it is and why it is, and it's not my fault. And
right. Work hard for that. I mean, I'm not denying that there are many things that are out of our control and people's control, and that sometimes situations can get so dark and dire that, people can get buried by that mental illness and so on. And my experience has been that I didn't believe I would be in a place where I could be out from under all of that. And I know I write about this in the book, but there was a time when I realized, I got driven home in a cop car with my daughter because I hadn't renewed my license again. And this cop pulled me over again. And I sat there on the couch after being dropped off by a police officer and not having access to a car anymore to take my daughter to school or to go grocery shopping. I was on my way to grocery shopping and realizing this was just one piece of this large sort of story that I had, or this big cloud of denial that I had been living in, that I, with my finances and everything else, where I just thought someone was going to come along and save me. I really thought that. Specifically, I thought a man would come along and save me. And I had this moment where I was like, no one's coming to save you. And that was hard to swallow. But also so freeing, best news ever.
And you're a smart, capable woman, so you can go and figure out doing a driver's license. You can do that, right?
I can. And I could figure out, I tallied up all my debt that day. I had this giant stack of mail that I'd been avoiding for really years. And I tallied it all up that day and realized I owed over $100,000. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to fix that, but it really was that like do the next right thing and then the next right thing. And then slowly, like I did get out of that debt and I did get my driver's license renewed. But man, I worked hard to keep that story. That story had really served me for a long time. And it also wasn't my fault. I mean, we grow up with a patriarchy and with Disney and all those things. And I had been very, my relationship with my dad was definitely one of like pat on the head, like, you can't
girl.
handle it out there, little girl,
Yeah.
and I'm going to take care of you. And that means I also control you. So there was a lot to unlearn, but yeah.
And can you just say a little bit about what your practice is to maintain your emotional sobriety and well-being and all that? Like what works for you right now?
What works for me is writing is a big help to me. I do both journal writing and, writing for the public. And that has just always been my sort of mainstay. I think writing is where I figure out what I actually feel, what I actually think and what's going on. I don't think you do not have to be a writer to benefit from writing things down. That's something that has more and more research and science behind it.
Agree. Yeah.
Community. So I'm in a weird place right now where I struggle because I don't have I founded a community, but I don't show up as a person among people in a community right now. And so that's something I'm like actively seeking out, but I have lots of amazing relationships with other women in sobriety. And so that's community too. And I talk to, whether it's via text or phone calls, I talk to women in recovery very regularly, if not daily, then certainly weekly. And that has to happen. Practice of honesty. I don't go through things alone in my head anymore. And I don't keep secrets anymore. And I'm really vigilant about that because I know where even just small things lead. So if I'm keeping some kind of secret, I tell on myself and I talk about it. And my movement is a huge part of my practice of just well-being. I am not a good person to be around or to be in my own head if I'm not, moving. And I've recently taken up hiking last year, which I love. I know you love it too. I'm a lover of my Peloton, and I started lifting weights too about a year ago, which is like one of the best things. Like I'm so excited about that. It just feels so good.
Yeah.
Those are the big ones. Yeah.
We have to. We're women of a certain age, so strength training is very
important. Of a certain age. We do. I'll be honest. That's why I did. I was like, oh, I am 45. That is officially of a certain age. And I've heard that this thing works. So, and I couldn't run anymore. Like my body just couldn't take it.
Yeah. I can't run. I stopped running once I had children. I couldn't run anymore.
Yeah. That's another thing that happens. Yeah, so those are the things. And I get a lot of sleep. Like I am militant about sleep.
So thank you, Laura. This is always a conversation that I don't want to end. What do you want people to get out of the book? What do you want them to take away? What's your hopes?
Yeah, my hope is that everyone could see themselves in this book, and that it's a book that you would pick up many, many times at different points for different reasons. It's, on the cover, it says it's about sobriety, but it also says it's about everything else. And I love the way you put it, that it's a book that shows us how to struggle well. So I hope it finds not just an audience, in people in recovery, but that it finds an audience of humans who want to learn how to struggle well. Those are my hopes. Yeah. And it's a very practical book. It's like there's a lot in there that you can actually do. So I hope that it's a usable book.
Yeah. And there's a book you can kind of dip in and out of as well. You can sort of just dip in and out of a chapter here and there. You don't even need to read it sort of, from page one. You can very much dip in and out, which I quite like books like that sometimes.
Me too. Like, what am I struggling with right now? Am I trying to do everything alone? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's read that chapter and remember why I can't and what I could do about it.
So congratulations. It's lovely.
Thank you.
It's available on Amazon and everywhere that you buy
Everywhere.
books. So
Hmm.
please, it's a really another essential book to your Quit Lit canon.
Hmm.
Just like the first one is. Where can people find you?
For social, I'm really only on Instagram, though I'm dipping in TikTok. We'll see how that goes. Laura underscore McKowen on both. And then my website, lauramckowen.com, has all of my offerings. So I teach a course. I have Substack, which I write on very regularly, and I'm really enjoying that. And I'll have another book coming out in 2025 all about relationships.
Ooh.
I know. That'll be back to memoir.
Yeah. Is your fiance getting anxious about that one? Because I keep threatening to write a book about relationships and my husband always goes pale.
Oh, that's awesome. He's like, what? No, he's great that way. He's like, hey, you do what you got to do. I'm like, there's gonna, now that I've started to actually map it out, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be rough. But no, he hasn't gone pale yet. We'll see.
And it's McKowen, McKowen. And I'm saying that because for years always put a G. I don't know why.
Oh, McGowan.
Yeah, I'd always have it as a G, so it's McKowen. So and
Yes.
that will all be in our show notes, and you'll see this on my social media. I'm on Instagram at Veronica J Valley, and there'll be, please let us know what you think. There'll be, and I'm sure Laura will post it as well. We would love to know your thoughts and all that. Laura, it's been
Thank
fabulous.
you.
Congratulations
So
on the
great to talk
book. Yeah, and
All right.
and good luck with it. I think
Thanks.
it's great.
Thank you.